The slippery slope argument. Is it true? Is it real? Is it something that we can demonstrate? We can show that when you open up the door to redefining marriage and say that two men or two women can, quote, marry, that it leads to a slippery slope where polygamists and polyamorous and those arguing for consensual adult incest and other unions, that it opens the door to them? I say, yeah, self-evident. Can we easily demonstrate it? I say yes. My guest, former Christian, now current host of the Real Atheology podcast, Justin Schieber, disputes that. And we're going to have a friendly discussion about that today on The Line of Fire. So without further ado, though, let's dive right in. Justin, great to have you back on The Line of Fire.
Hey, Dr. Braun, thanks for having me.
Sure thing. All right, so just to give the brief recap, I had spoken about this many times, written about it, posted videos, books, different things, but I had posted something on Twitter about the new definitions of marriage, or people marrying themselves, or whatever it is, marrying an animal. And I just said, look, all part of the slippery slope. And you disputed that. You felt, no, there's not a direct connection between the redefining of marriage with same-sex unions and these others. And you said, let's discuss it. So, Justin, we've just got a couple minutes here in this first segment, but why not give me just the essence, then we'll unpack this, the essence of why you don't see this as part of a larger slippery slope?
Yeah, sure. So I think that one of the most important things to do is to distinguish between kind of a social or religious idea of marriage and the legal civil institution of marriage. So only one of those actually brings with it additional legal rights and responsibilities. People have always been free to call whatever they want marriage. You can quote unquote marry the Eiffel Tower. That doesn't mean it's legally recognized. And so essentially my argument is that there are independent reasons for not including these other doomsday scenarios that you lay out. There are independent arguments for stopping the slope when it comes to the legal institution of marriage. The social institution of marriage, you can call whatever you want marriage. It doesn't make it legally recognized.
All right. So just to go back on that, two things. One, if I can show you that redefining marriage has opened the door for a larger societal discussion of the redefinition of marriage, can that ultimately influence the courts? That's one question. And the other question is, what if I can show you that these different groups are going to the courts and using as a precedent the argument that marriage has been redefined for homosexuals? Would that then prove my point?
So you're asking whether or not the merely the discussion of these things would influence the courts?
In other words, if the society makes a shift, right, because of same-sex marriage opening up a whole ideological and social door and conceptual door, and now that continues to spill into media and other things, and then that leads to the Supreme Court recognizing that. The Supreme Court is often recognizing what's happening in society. What if society begins to shift more and more to openness to polygamy, polyamory, other things like that? Won't that ultimately influence the courts? Tell you what, to be fair, because we've got a break here, chew on that for a second. We will be right back, and you can respond to that question. So here's where we're going to start. Has society changed its view on marriage due to same-sex marriage? And can that then influence the courts in the future? We'll be right back. Thanks so much for joining us today on Line of Fire, having a friendly discussion with atheist, former Christian, current host of the Real Atheology podcast, an examination of contemporary philosophy of religion from an atheistic perspective, Justin Schieber. And we are discussing today whether the redefining of marriage to say two men or two women can, quote, marry, has that led to a slippery slope that has opened the door, say, to polygamists or polyamorous or others? So, Justin, right before the break, I was replying to the distinction you made between society changing its view, where someone can marry the Eiffel Tower or marry a dog, but it's not legal, and then legal institutions where the courts recognize a change. And I was asking you if society can influence the direction that the courts go. In other words, 30, 40 years ago, almost nobody was talking about the idea of same-sex, quote, marriage. As it gained ground among the general population, then ultimately the courts went with a shift in the popular opinion and ended up redefining marriage. I'm arguing that the same thing is happening now with polygamy, with polyamory, even with consensual adult incest, that changes in the society will ultimately reflect changes in the courts. So your response to that, sir?
Sure. So when it comes to civil institutions exist for a reason. They have a purpose behind them. And so any proposed change or alteration of that civil institution will need to be assessed on its own merits as to its ability to fulfill the ends of that institution. And what I'm arguing is that these other doomsday scenarios that you're bringing up, they not only don't contribute to that end, but they also plausibly bring with them narrow consequences that are actually bad consequences. Some of them have seemingly unsurmountable pragmatic problems with them. So I'm not at all worried in the way that you are about these other things following from them. Moreover, people have always had arrangements that they've called marriage. Long before gay marriage, you had someone marry the Eiffel Tower. That doesn't mean that it's legally recognized, and I see no reason to think that it ever would be.
All right. So let's first talk about it on the popular level. All right. Do you recognize that on a popular level, that the same media that, I know you're in Canada, but I think a lot of the shows are similar, the same media that was aggressively pushing things like homosexuality, Will and Grace, shows like that, Queer Eye for the Straight Guy, that they are also pushing things like polygamy now, Big Love, Sister Wives, My Five Wives. They're pushing polyamory, shows like Married and Dating. They are more and more celebrating adult consensual incest, to the point that a poll, Gallup poll a few years back, indicated that acceptance of polygamy in America went from 7% to 14% in just a couple of years. Obviously, the influence of the media. So aside from the legal question, which we'll come back to, and I respect that, can you see a shift in society as a whole that is this part of a larger sexual revolution, say?
Sure, and I think it's perfectly fine. I don't see any problem. In fact, if someone wants to argue that there is a moral problem with polygamy, then I'd be interested in hearing that argument. The biblical patriarchs used it. Everyone has used it for a long time. Doesn't make it right. I'm just saying that if there's an argument there, it's not forthcoming. Moreover, there are pragmatic reasons to think that polygamy would never come about. So, for example, the change from heterosexual marriage to include gender-neutral norms when having a marriage contract, that's a very simple change. But once you bring in multiple parties into a contract, there are pragmatic legal reasons to think that that's just so remarkably implausible that could be fit into a larger legal framework, that it could be respected by the law in that way. So I find this to be a bizarre argument. I don't think there's any pragmatic legal way to bring this about. That said, if there is a way that it could bring about, I have absolutely no objection to polygamous marriage.
Got it. All right. So first, because we've had polygamy here long before same-sex, quote, marriage, and I would say that redefining marriage so that it's now gender neutral is a far more radical step than polygamy. And the very arguments that you raised about the massive changes it requires, I'd say we're witnessing right in front of our eyes. Because once you say by definition you can have a union that cannot, by definition, procreate in itself, and that by definition will guarantee that a child raised is either raised apart from mother or father, then some of the most fundamental norms of marriage have just been abolished. But let's focus on this. Please give me a legal reason as to why two adult brothers should not be allowed to marry.
Two adult brothers? I don't see that there would be a legal reason. Do you think that there's a moral reason here?
Oh, of course. I see the necessity of having a wall against incest once you can look at family members as potential sexual romantic objects. All hell can break loose in that respect. But that being said, since you're talking about the contractual issues, there's no difference in a contractual issue between two men who are not blood related and two men who are blood related having this new union, correct?
Yeah, so the problems that we have with incest generally they're tied to the fact that there are problems that come about when people try to reproduce. So when it comes to a legal framework, because we do not want to ask questions of couples, we generally think it's a bad idea to allow those kinds of things. So there's a legal argument for you.
But two brothers. That's why I asked about two brothers.
Yeah. So two brothers. So morally, I don't have a problem with it. But when it comes to legally, I think that would be quite a problem, because it's going to introduce issues of privacy when it talks about procreative ambitions. Obviously, the brothers is not going to be an issue there. But
hang on. You're
point.
guaranteeing that a same-sex couple, by definition, cannot procreate. And again, the only reason that the government gets involved in marriage is because marriage conveys benefits on society. Therefore, society conveys benefits on marriage. And the benefits are, as a norm, procreation and joining the child to the mother and father. That's the only reason that the government gets involved in marriage. Otherwise, that's people's private lives.
True.
Of course it's true.
That's not true. No,
surely it's true.
Marriage brings with it so many more additional benefits to just becoming an incubator for the next generation.
No, actually, without that, there is no next generation, sir. Without that, there is no next. Historically, the only reason that our government has gotten involved in marriage is for the reasons I just stated, and it's understood that if you want to talk about, for example, health risks with incest, well, health risks for men having sex with men are off the charts compared to a heterosexual couple. So is the government going to intervene then and say, well, we can't allow two men to marry because there's much higher rates of HIV and AIDS and other sexually transmitted diseases?
I want to bring the discussion back to the point of there being only one or two reasons that are child-centered for the state to have recognized institutions of marriage.
Those are the primary reasons.
That's just
primary reasons.
Well, so even if they're the primary reason, that doesn't mean that there aren't good reasons to have people recognize marriage who have no child-rearing ambitions whatsoever. Right? You can go.
But you now redefine it by nature, so you guarantee some households cannot procreate within themselves and will separate a child from mother or father for life. That's in the worst interest of the child. So the government should get involved. I mean, polygamy is far less intrusive. Polygamy has worked for centuries around the world, and there are many nations with polygamy to this day, and it does bring about procreation, and it does draw on a child to a mother and father. That's why I say redefining marriage is far further down the slope than polygamy.
Yeah, I don't see a problem with polygamy. I'm saying that there is a legal problem there when it comes to whether or not we could even form a coherent legal framework to take account for those complex relationships. But when you talk about changing civil institutions as we move forward in time, I think that if we don't have, at least in principle, the ability to make our institutions malleable, then that's a huge problem. If we fail to adapt and mature our institutions to better fit our growing understanding of civil life and liberty, we undermine its very ability to serve the purpose for which it was created. And
right, slippery slope, in other words. But right, so basically, what you're saying is the slippery slope is not bad. I mean, that's the bottom line. That you can't really argue against why two men shouldn't marry, and theoretically you have no problem with polygamy, and if society changes and grows, that's the whole thing. I'm saying society is going in the wrong direction. Let's say you call it an upward
but that's not
move.
An argument saying that, right? You're saying it's bad, but you've given no argument for why it wouldn't contribute to societal stability when you have people joining.
But that wasn't our discussion, sir. I'm happy to debate that. I'm very, very happy to debate that. But that wasn't the issue. The issue was, when you redefine marriage, does it open the door to justice? Of course it is. I mean, you're basically arguing my point from another angle. You're saying, yeah, well, society's growing and improving, and we should have the ability to change things and be malleable. That's the whole point. That once you start playing with it, once you start. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm arguing that that's just simply not a bad thing. If for example,
so we've I just want to be clear, and again, to be fair, you'll start when we pick up. Okay, just to be clear, we've now shifted. The initial argument was there is no necessary slippery slope. There's no necessary way you can see that you can get from one point to the other point. Now you're saying, but it's not a problem to get from one point to the other point. So you're shifted. From what I can tell. If I'm wrong, set me straight. Thanks for joining us today on The Line of Fire. I'm having a friendly debate with atheist Justin Schieber. He is the host of the Real Atheology podcast. And we were debating whether redefining marriage to include the union of two men or two women leads to a slippery slope where you have all kinds of other marital unions that are accepted, like polygamy, like polyamory, and others. So we're in the midst of this discussion. And Justin, you're a careful thinker, and I'm not trying to play games here, and I'm not trying to misrepresent you. So please help me if I'm missing something. I thought initially your argument was that there are legal reasons why redefining marriage for the union of two men, two women will not lead to, say, polygamy, polyamory, or even adult incestuous unions being recognized by the courts. Then it seemed to me you were saying, look, society should be malleable, the laws should be malleable, and it's fine to have some of these other definitions, so it's fine if the courts change them, which to me is arguing my point, but just saying the slippery slope isn't bad. So tell me what I'm missing, because it sounded like you've shifted in what you're saying.
No, I don't believe I've shifted. So here's my statements, and they're all perfectly consistent. What I'm saying is that, one, I'm objecting to your point that the slip is necessary or even inevitable from the expanding civil marriage to include same-sex unions. I'm saying that these slopes to these other things, it's neither necessary nor is it inevitable. But I'm also saying that there are reasons that are both pragmatic and moral reasons to prevent some of those things. To show you the first point, and thirdly, I'm saying that I don't agree with you whether or not these things are necessarily good or bad. Those are all perfectly consistent positions, and I've been arguing that from the beginning here. I'm saying that there are good principled reasons to think that it wouldn't happen. Your claim that it is going to happen is completely unfounded. You haven't actually interacted with any of the reasons that I've provided to show that these things don't contribute to the end of marriage outside of polygamy, which I see no moral problem with. But maybe we could talk about your moral argument against polygamy to see if it has any weight at all, because biblically speaking, I don't really know that you have a ground there.
Yeah, well, polygamy is very easy to argue against based on Scriptures, contrary to God's ideal. But again, I do find your points candidly to be somewhat contradictory, but let's unpack them as separate. Okay, when it comes to popular opinion, first thing that is easily demonstrated is the same media and the same pop culture that celebrated homosexuality and helped bring that to more and more national acceptance, to the point that the courts could rule in favor of it, despite a massive redefinition of marriage, basically unknown in a major way throughout history, that marriage was now gender neutral. It would be like saying that a plane... Excuse me?
Marriage has changed how many times throughout history?
But it has always had, unless you had like a Nero, quote, marriage to his male lover, marriage has always been the union of man and woman. Even in cultures where homosexuality was celebrated, it was not considered marriage, because marriage by definition has always been the union of a man and woman. It could have been a man and several women. It could have been other things like that. But it always required male favor. This is the most fundamental redefinition of marriage in human history. We have to recognize that. By definition, it gets away from two of the most fundamentally important parts of marriage. Not the only, but two of the most fundamentally important parts of marriage. By definition, it cannot procreate in itself, and it cannot join the child to a mother and father. This is a welfare issue in terms of what is in the best interest. What is the best welfare of the state is to have kids raised in an environment with a mother and father. And if we dip below 2.11 children per woman during childbearing years, there will be no future of any country when you get down to lower procreation rates. So this has always just been a matter of the ongoing survival of the human race and the best interest of the human race. But the same media that celebrated these things, celebrating polyamory, polygamy, adult incest, and now these things are coming to the courts. It is the slippery slope. So in the state of Utah, for example, polygamists have already succeeded in having one law against polygamy removed. And one of their arguments is, hey, look, if Heather can have two mommies, why can't Heather have two mommies and a daddy? And there is no logical reason to say why that cannot happen. And then you have, say, cases of adult incest, where lawyers have gone to the courts and said if two men or two women could marry, why can't this adult man and say an adult son or an adult daughter, why can't they be together? and a group of German ethicists have now concluded that there's no moral objection to adult consensual incest. This is part of a larger shifting tide, hence the slippery slope. I mean, to me, it's self-evident. It's undeniable. It's happening in front of our eyes, and the courts are now dealing with these issues on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, the fact that there are people attempting this in no way proves your point that it's inevitable. There have been people arguing for legislation in all different ways. It has no logical connection to your central point here.
Well, of course it does. It goes little by little. Society shifts, and then shifts start to come in the courts, and then more and more rulings, and then things that you never would have thought were acceptable become acceptable. Of course, I can't guarantee it, but I can say this is the direction we're heading. That's all the slippery slope says. This is the direction we're heading. The very fact that we're even discussing whether polygamy should be legalized, whether polyamory should be legalized, whether consensual adult incest should be legalized, already proves the point. The fact that these things are even being discussed at all. And you have 500,000 plus polyamorous saying, or families saying, hey, we're living like this. One of the courts going to recognize it. They march in the gay pride marches and say we're next. So
here's an interesting issue, though. I mean, you've been arguing that marriage is by definition one man, one woman, right? But then at the same time, you have the Bible referring to David's many wives. You have also when David kills Bathsheba's husband in order to get with her. You have God saying, "Well, I wish you would have told me. I would have given you many more wives if it would have prevented you from killing this man." Right? So God has no problem granting people more wives if it means that it'll suffice for their needs.
Is that everything the Bible says about polygamy? No.
No, the Bible
every
says
example
many things,
of it.
The Bible's written by multiple different authors who disagree on many fundamental things.
No,
so
actually, they're
pointing
consistent.
to contradictions within the Bible does not make your point.
Well, first, I didn't bring the Bible up. You did. Okay, I've talked about the definition of marriage in history, always included the man and woman. I'm perfectly happy. Justin, I assure you, sir, I assure you, I'm perfectly happy to debate what the Bible says. But what does the Bible warn us about? It tells us about the negative consequences. First, Adam and Eve, not Adam and Eve and Yvette and Yvonne. That's where things start, number one. Number two, what do we see? That David's many wives led to his destruction, that Solomon's many wives led to his destruction, that these things were harmful, that Jacob's 2 wives was always painful and difficult. What does Jesus then say in the New Testament? He reiterates Matthew 19:4-6, one man, one woman for life. What does Paul say? You can't be a leader in the church unless you're married to one woman. You can't be married to multiple women, and you're supposed to follow the example of your leader. So polygamy was allowed, but it was never God's ideal. But either way, always, every ingredient in the Bible outside marriage required a man and a woman. To change that is to radically redefine it. Once you redefine it, you render it meaningless. I'm speaking with atheist Justin Schieber, host of the Real Atheology podcast, about whether redefining marriage to include the union of 2 men and 2 women opens the door for further redefinitions. If you missed any part of the broadcast, just go to thelineoffire.org later today and click on Listen. Justin, let's try this angle here. In your view, which is a more radical redefinition of marriage, saying that 2 men or 2 women can marry, or accepting polygamy? Just in your own opinion.
I don't know. I guess I would argue polygamy is more radical, just because it is such a added complexity to the issue, rather than just making the relationship. Obviously, relationships require at least 2 people to be involved, and so at the base level, a relationship and a legal recognition of that relationship makes more sense on one-on-one. But that doesn't exclude the others. I'm just arguing that you're probably right in that expansion than just making the gender neutral aspect of it.
Okay, and what about this? You say by definition relationship requires at least 2. What about people practicing, what's it called, Sologamy? So they're marrying themselves. There's even a growing industry now of people who provide for weddings and things like that. And in their mind, this is real and valid, and they are doing this. Why shouldn't the government recognize that? In other words, why should the government recognize one relationship and not this one? But to these people, it's very real.
Well, because such quote unquote relationships don't in any way contribute to the end of marriage, which is societal stability. So it doesn't contribute when it comes to combining resources, to combining financial resources, to combining social resources. Much of the benefit that we get from marriage is to when people are your first line of defense of moral and fiscal and emotional breakdown. That way, not every time you go into debt, you have to require, welfare or something, right?
You're why not just live together? Why not just live together then? Solves the same problem. It's not as messy.
That would work too. But the point is that the state.
But then why does the state make a big fuss about marriage? Again, without question, historically, the main purpose of people coming together in marriage is to join together for life, to produce children for the next generation, and to join those children by fathers and mothers. That has always been, sir, the norm and the most basic. Not that every couple procreates, but that is the norm. You don't establish something that cannot possibly fulfill that norm and make it its new norm. The idea of people sharing resources and things like that, for much of world history, it was the man that was working and the mother that was caring for the kids. She was not bringing in extra resources, or this wasn't for debt reduction and things like that. Plenty of people live together these days to pool their resources, but that does not bring about what marriage brings about.
But here's the thing: when people ask for a marriage license, we are not even allowed to ask them whether or not they have plans to having kids. We are not allowed to ask them whether or not they physically can have kids. We do not care about the potential for child rearing. That is because of the benefits that are not involved with kids that marriage still brings to the society at large.
No, it's the exact opposite. It's because it's presumed that a couple getting married is going to have sex and that the majority of them are going to have children and that they want to have children. That's just the way it goes. But you do not set up a new norm that guarantees. You do not set up a new norm that guarantees that they cannot reproduce in themselves, and that guarantees that if they have a way to bring a child into the world, they separate it from the mother and father. That ultimately, for the stability of society, is the worst thing to do, not the best thing to do for it. So simply societal stability argues in every way against redefining marriage. But still, I haven't heard anything to explain why the same legal arguments, when they come to the courts, won't be used to further redefine marriage. We're seeing steps in those directions already. All right, we've got one more segment with our guests. We'll take your calls, too. Thanks for joining us today on The Line of Fire, 866-34-TRUTH. I'm going to open up the phones momentarily. I'm speaking with Justin Schieber. He is the host of the Real Atheology podcast. Justin, let me read something to you from a representative from the Canadian Civil Liberties Association. She says consenting adults have the charter-protected right to form the families that they want to form. Do you accept that statement?
Sure, but I'm not actually from Canada.
Okay.
Yeah,
got it. All right, fine. Your protagonist and friend in the previous debate we had on the air, Randall Rouser from Canada. Got it. So you're based where, sir?
Michigan.
All right. Well, in the north, anyhow. In the north. All right. Sorry for that misplacement there. In any case, this statement, the woman who argued consenting adults have the charter-protected right to form the families that they want to form, she was arguing for polygamy. And then Matthew Galuzzo, who was the attorney for Professor David Epstein, who was charged with carrying on a 3-year consensual affair with his adult daughter, he said it's okay for homosexuals to do whatever they want in their own home. How is this so different? We have to figure out why some behavior is tolerated and some is not. So ultimately, the question is, don't people have the right to form these unions? And shouldn't the government then recognize them to give them some type of sanctity or some type of recognition so that, hey, if you want to have more stability with gay couples being together, then have more stability with polygamous, polyamorous by sanctioning it. Wouldn't that be the same logic?
Well, again, there are independent reasons for not wanting to grant legal sanction to incestuous marriages. That much is obvious. I don't know why we're still debating that.
Well, two brothers. We still haven't gone anywhere with why it's wrong for two brothers. Here in Ireland, now that they have voted to redefine marriage, one of the leading advocates for that, a congressman there who himself is gay, said, what about first cousins who are same-sex? Why can't we go there? It's a taboo, but why not?
So legislatively, if we want to have a coherent legislative system, we need to legislate in broad categories, right? We don't legislate, in specific circumstances where you're two brothers, then it's okay, right? What we do is we have broad legislation that applies to all these different categories.
Here, anyone from the same sex, anyone from the same sex, that's broad. Anyone from the same sex can marry. How's that? As long as they're consenting adults. So that covers incestuous as well. That's a broad category. Anyone who's same sex can marry.
There are reasons, independent reasons.
Well, why can't two brothers marry?
I don't know how many times I have to repeat this. So
I haven't gotten an answer yet.
If we're talking about incestuous marriage, the category of incestuous marriage, there are reasons, privacy reasons, that the state shouldn't inquire about the details, and so we close that
what
off.
Details? What details? Two men, Justin. Two men. What details? Two men want to marry. The courts can't say are you brothers or not. That's invading their privacy. Two brothers. They're 30 years old. They're twins.
Scenario, I have no moral problem with it. The point.
Give me a legal reason against it. Give me a legal reason against it.
Again, the legal reason would be about the broadness of legal legislation that enters that.
But it's broad. It's totally broad. If you're of the same sex, you can marry. How much broader could it be?
If you're talking about that specific scenario, again, I have no problem with it.
Well, the slippery slope, then. That's my whole argument. If you can do the one, you can do the other. Without the one, you don't get to the other. Of course, that's clear. All right. How about this? You say that marriage is, quote, for the stability of society, but we know full well it's the open secret that gay men still tend to sleep around, and that very, very few are monogamous in the same way that heterosexual couples are monogamous. In fact, they call it monogamish. They redefine it. So you still have the problem of sexually transmitted diseases. You still have the problem of lack of stability, which cannot equal the stability of a heterosexual home. Why should the courts go there? It's got all these other issues.
I don't understand what's the actual inference being made here. If the inference is saying that we shouldn't allow these protections for same-sex individuals because some of them still bring with them the liabilities of single life with them. I mean that's not a valid inference because that you're criminalizing the broad category for the behavior of some of them.
No, it's the majority. Number one. Number two, we're saying it's still not marriage in the same sense that it's heterosexual marriage. Number three, you're saying that the whole thing is about stability. Well, this really doesn't bring the stability. Number four, you're saying one reason against incest.
There are a lot of heterosexual marriages that are open. Is that something that you would like to end? Is that something that you would like to say we shouldn't allow marriage? We shouldn't allow open marriage?
Well, but the whole thing is once you call it open marriage, you don't get married and call it open marriage. You get married, then start fooling around with others. That's wrong. No, if you want to have multiple partners that have it all recognized, not. But again, this is the exception to the rule. The norm among gay men is that they are not monogamous. That's the norm, and it's widely reported even in gay publications. This is not some internet conspiracy, from the Illuminati that I'm repeating. And so you have the fact that they can't procreate by nature. You have the fact that if they bring a child into the world, that child is guaranteed to be separated from father and mother. You have the norm that they have more sexually transmitted diseases, and you have the norm that their relationships are less stable. Why in the world do we completely redefine marriage for that?
When you bring marriage into the picture, it brings with it some stability. The point being that
it's the same for everybody. The same for polygamists, polyamorous, everybody. So do it for everybody. Bring in some stability.
I have no problem with that. I don't know where this inference is going.
Well, that's a slippery slope then. Exactly. If you can do it for one, you can do it for the other. I think the whole debate, you proved my point eloquently from beginning to end, and there's no legal or social.
You failed to show that my three positions here are inconsistent. I've argued consistently, and you don't like the view, but that's fine. I guess we'll just, maybe you have some kind of a bet with someone about these things. Maybe you'll marry a lobster down in the future. it does not.
Or maybe a Martian just took you over, and you're actually a robot, and it's not even a human being speaking. Let's not be silly here, okay, Justin? Let's not be silly. There's
that's
no
what I've been asking from you from the beginning of this conversation.
And I've given it to you. Tell you what. Here's what we're going to do. State your first point. I'll give you my quick answer. We'll do this really shotgun fashion. First point. Your first argument.
I've said that none of these things are inevitable. None of these, all of these things have principled reasons, or at least the ones that I'm against. All of them have principled or pragmatic reasons against them.
All right, and what you have said along the way is really there is no principled or pragmatic reason against most of them, and you have no issue with them. And I've demonstrated that this is the direction we are going. Second point.
I'd like to say, well, okay. So my second point is that there's nothing wrong with polygamy. Do you have an objection to that?
Well, again, that's not the argument. The argument was not, is there anything wrong with polygamy? The argument was, once we redefine marriage, I'm coming back to your points. Our debate is about, once you redefine marriage, does it open up the door to a slippery slope? Slippery slope is not inevitable. It means that's the direction it is likely going. And the answer is yes. We see it in society, views shifting. We see it in the media, pushing for new things. And we see things coming to the courts. And we see little by little, even the chipping away of these things.
All of these relationships you're referring to that are the end product of the slippery slope happened long before and have been happening long before the gay marriage thing. Gay marriage did absolutely nothing to that.
These are always false. Totally false.
That people called marriage.
Gay marriage opened the door. You didn't have the media celebrating polygamy before it celebrated gay marriage. You didn't have the media celebrating incestuous relationships the way they do now.
It was the norm. However long ago?
You didn't have, no one ever heard of polyamory. Now the polyamorous march in the gay pride parades and say we're 20, 30 years behind where the gay rights movement is. Of course, redefining marriage on every level.
Marriage as a historical concept, because
redefining marriage
was the norm for thousands of years.
Redefining marriage on every level.
You need to pick up a book.
You actually insult, sir. You insult yourself, not me, with these arguments. Marriage through history has always required two fundamental elements: a male and a female. You could have more than one. But you always had a male and a female, even in societies, Justin, please, even in societies that celebrated homosexual unions in certain contexts, marriage was understood to be male and female for many reasons. And the most fundamental things about marriage have always been known and are not a mystery. Procreation and joining the children to a mother and father, that is the norm. When you make that now the impossibility, the one thing that cannot happen, you fundamentally redefine it, thereby render it meaningless. Hey, we've gone around on this. I appreciate you wanting to come on and debate it. We're going to have to leave it here. I do appreciate you coming on to have this dialogue with me.
Thanks for having me.
All right, you bet.